As the aftermath of World War I saw the Austro-Hungarian Empire disintegrate, there was an attempt to prevent the ships of the Kaiserliche und Königliche Kriegsmarine from falling into enemy hands. Just before signing a peace treaty, the entire navy was officially transferred to the new Kingdom of Serbs, Croats and Slovenes, which had no treaty obligations with the Allies as it hadn't existed until a few weeks earlier. However, the Italians, who were hoping to ensure the Adriatic was under their easy control, decided to call the ruse for what it was, and in the end most of the ships ended up being ceded to the Allies anyway, leaving the new country with a minimal number of small craft and forcing them to build a new navy from the keel up. Realising that any force they had would necessarily be limited in number and size, the Kingdom of Serbs, Croats and Slovenes decided for individual quality over quantity, and in the late 1920s began drafting a design for a class of what were very large destroyers for the period, based on other nations' flotilla leaders rather than regular fleet destroyers. For some idea of the contrast, contemporary British fleet destroyers were just under 1,400 ton standard. The upcoming Farragut class in the United States were a fraction lighter still. Italian ships were considerably lighter, and even the new trend-breaking Fabruchis were 1,750 tons standard displacement. By contrast, this particular destroyer design was going to be 1,880 tons standard and 2,400 tons when fully loaded. The only destroyers that would be larger would be the French contre-torpilleurs. 3 ships were planned for the class, but unfortunately the Great Depression hit in 1929 and the class of 3 rapidly became a class of 1, the destroyer Dubrovnik. On the other hand, the Kingdom of Serbs, Croats and Slovenes renamed itself to Yugoslavia at this point, which is much easier to say. As planned, the main armament was to be 5 single guns, much like contemporary British flotilla leaders, which was the design that the ship was based on, but these weapons were to be 5.5-inch Skoda-made guns, and their larger size, and thus greater weight, meant that in the end one of them was deleted from the design for stability reasons, leaving a total of 4 mounted in superfiring positions fore and aft. The 5th gun position, between the funnels, was instead given a pair of twin 40mm Skoda anti-aircraft guns, with 2 single guns of the same type further aft, complementing a bandstand mount aft of the funnels, which was armed with a pair of rather weird caliber 83.5mm or 3.29-inch anti-aircraft guns. It doesn't make sense in either measure, but anyway, they were there, along with a pair of heavy machine guns. Although the main guns weren't dual purpose, this would still give the ship one of the heaviest, if not the heaviest, practical anti-aircraft batteries of any destroyer in the world at the time. Fore and aft of the bandstand mount were a set of triple torpedo launchers each for a total of 6 tubes, along with depth charge projectors and rails which allowed for the carriage of 10 depth charges and 40 mines. Speed was pretty quick at 37 knots, which was provided by 48,000 shaft horsepower, which drove 2 screws via turbines, and she'd actually prove to be even faster when the conditions were right. Laid down in summer 1930 at the Yarrow shipyards in Glasgow, she was launched in the autumn of the following year and entered service in May 1932. As the largest and most modern ship in the Yugoslav Navy, she was given many of the prestigious show the flag and transport the dignitary missions that are very often taken up by fleet flagships. But when Yugoslavia found itself drawn into World War II in April 1941, it was via German land invasion, and as such there was fairly little the ship could do to prevent the fall of the country. Instead, captured by the Italians, she was refitted, renamed Premuda, and largely rearmed with Italian weapons, entering service with the Regia Marina in early 1942, almost a year after her capture. In a way, she actually got her revenge on the Italians pretty quickly, her distinctively British lines causing an Italian submarine to fire on her by mistake a few months after she entered service. The torpedo missed, and instead blew up the nearby Antoniotto Uso di Mare, a Navigatore-class vessel which the Dubrovnik had originally been built to counter. After taking part in a number of raids and transport missions, she was taken in hand for a major refit and rebuild, which was still underway in September 1943 when Italy bowed out of the war, and the Germans now took over the ship, renaming it yet again. Now she was TA-32. Rearmed, yet again, this time with numerous German-made anti-aircraft guns, she was intended to for use as an anti-aircraft vessel. But circumstances saw her instead revert to more typical destroyer tasks, including shore bombardment and mine-laying, and surprisingly she was actually still around in 1945 when she and 2 other ex-Italian ships, now flying the Kriegsmarine flag, were on a mine-laying mission when they were caught by HMS Lookout and HMS Meteor, 2 large British destroyers that rapidly overwhelmed TA-32's smaller companions. But, being larger and faster than the other 2 ships, she was able to escape into the night with only some minor damage. She almost managed to survive the war, but was scuttled near the end of April 1945, 9 days before the Germans' surrender, in Genoa harbour, when the Germans were forced to abandon the city, and she'd remained there as a wreck until she was salvaged and scrapped in 1950.
That's it for this video. Thanks for watching. If you have a comment or suggestion for a ship to review, let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to comment on the pinned post for dry dock questions.